Welcome to Pennsylvania in Focus. I'm Eliana Kernodle. One day after voter registration closed in Pennsylvania, more than 1 million ballots had already been cast. Joining me with more on this story is the Center Square's Pennsylvania editor, Kristen Smith. Kristen, what are the numbers we have on this?
So to be specific, we have, as of Tuesday at 8 a.m., 1,051,655 mail-in votes. And that is more than half of the 1.8 million that have been requested. And what that means is of the registered voters, 1.8 million of them have requested a mail-in ballot because you have to ask for one specifically. The rule in Pennsylvania, though, is once you ask for one, you don't have to keep asking for them in subsequent elections. There's 9 million registered voters in Pennsylvania. Not all of them will participate. But in the last presidential election in 2020, more than 6 million voters turned out. So that's a pretty good chunk. It's been slowly rising over the years. So, but 1.8 million is just a fraction of that. So as is typical, Democratic ballots, I should say ballots that are coming from registered Democrats, totaled 649,060. And they have about 40% of their mail-in ballots outstanding. Republicans have returned about 300,862 ballots, and they have 57% unreturned. And then we have unaffiliated voters in Pennsylvania that have sent in 101,733 ballots, which is about 66, leaving about 66% still outstanding. So it's pretty good return rates already. We're, leading up to the election in Pennsylvania, you can only vote early by mail-in ballot. Otherwise, you have to show up at the polls on election day to vote in person. So there's not really any surprises with these numbers. Typically, registered Democrats request mail-in ballots at higher rates, and then they turn them in at higher rates. And in fact, mail-in ballots were in 2020 a huge source of scrutiny and conflicts regarding the final results because some of the races came down to 10,000 votes. The race between Donald Trump and Joe Biden was less than 100,000 votes. And so when you're talking 9 million voters, those mail-in ballots can have a really big impact on the final results. So Pennsylvania being the key swing state that it is, all eyes are on these mail-in ballots.
As we mentioned, registration just closed. What insights can we gain from the registration numbers?
Well, if ballot returns are unsurprising, where the interesting data is coming from is actual voter registration numbers. Historically, Democrats have outnumbered registered Republicans in Pennsylvania, but that trend is shifting. So in 2020, or since 2020, I should say, Republicans gained more than 428,000 of their current 3.7 million registered voters. And in the same 4-year time period, Democrats have lost about 257,000 of their roughly 4 million voters. So now the gap between the two has shrunk significantly to just less than 300,000. So that's an interesting shift that political analysts have kept their eye on. At the same time, we had 1.4 million independent voters, and given the closeness of this race, 1.4 million independent voters is a lot, especially if all of them came to the polls. That would make a really big difference for Republicans versus Democrats. And so it's, historically speaking, Republicans in the last couple of elections have done better with independents, given the contested nature of this race and the razor-thin margins in recent polling. It's incredibly unclear where they're falling as for now, and it's basically going to be something that we can't know until Election Day or likely the days after.
Well, Kristen, thank you for your insights on this story. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.